happened a few years back in a mountain suburb of Vancouver, Canada. This really happened, although I wish it didn't. My aunt had just purchased a beautiful old home in this neighborhood. But being a business executive, she often traveled around Canada for work purposes. Her 2 children were at their dad's home for an extended period, and their live-in nanny went back to her home abroad for a much-deserved break. Therefore, my aunt asked if I could house sit. As a large home would be unoccupied, she felt uncomfortable with that. I agreed to this, thinking it would be a small weekend break where I could lounge around and raid their fridge. The drive was about an hour and a half from my place, and I was generally eager about the whole thing. The nanny, who we were all very close to, who was like a second mother to my younger cousins, warned me before leaving that she thought the house was haunted. The country where she's from, the Philippines, has strong beliefs about the paranormal and ghosts. It said that she routinely saw a woman dressed in Victorian clothing by the outdoor pool. She told me to do some special prayers for protection. Being a believer in the paranormal and experiencing things myself before in unrelated incidents, I took her seriously and was a bit frightened, but I figured at this point it was too late to back out. She left, and I settled into the home. The first few hours were pretty uneventful. I just watched some TV, browsed the internet, and read some of their tabletop magazines. Eventually, I sort of forgot about what she had said about the haunting. So I ate dinner, took a brief swim, and then things started to get a bit weird. I had that familiar feeling of being watched that most people report when speaking of the paranormal. I tried my best to shrug it off and realized that I had forgotten an extra towel outside on one of the patio chairs back when I was swimming. When I went outdoors, the towel was floating in the middle of the pool. This freaked me out a bit, but I forced myself to calm down and watch TV, hoping it would distract me. I was watching reruns of My So-Called Life when the faucet in the kitchen began to pour water. I went to turn it off and noticed that a single plate lay in the center of the floor face down. I put it away and nervously got back to the TV room, but sit in the corner with my back facing the wall because I was growing scared and didn't want something to sneak up behind me like in a horror movie. From where I was sitting, you could see the outdoor pool through a glass wall screen. After about a half an hour, I noticed the water was sort of bubbling. I went close to the glass door to investigate and saw that it appeared the water was moving as if somebody was doing quick laps back and forth. Yet there was no audible splash sounds to accompany the movement. I also got an overwhelming sense of dread and goosebumps formed in my arms and on the back of my neck. I turned off the TV, made sure all the doors were locked, and sprinted upstairs to the master bedroom. I curled up under the covers and started reciting the prayers the nanny taught me before she had left. I must have stayed awake for what felt like hours long after the sun had set, trying to will myself to sleep. I left the lights on in the room because I was frightened. As I closed my eyes and tried to calm down, I heard a piercing scream that seemed to come from outside the window. The light then turned off, leaving me in darkness. At this point, I'm having a heart attack, but I'm too scared to move. All of a sudden, the locked windows started to flap open and shut forcefully. They were the old ones that had the panes that open outwards, if that makes any sense. Also, at the same time, thick, heavy wooden doors in the hallway leading up to the bedroom began to do the same, causing loud banging, and I felt as if the whole house was shaking. These doors would not have been moved by a strong gust of wind, only by the forceful movement of a hand. Also, the opening and closing of the doors and windows were all synchronized perfectly. After about 5 minutes, everything stopped. The silence was almost deafening, and all I could hear was my stifled but heavy breath, and then I heard a sound that sent shivers down my whole body. The glass screen door on the first floor slid open, then shut. There were slow, methodical steps coming through the TV room and then up the stairs. It was as if each step were taken with intention, loud enough to knowingly scare me. Then the first door opened in the hallway, then the other, and finally, the bedroom door creaked open. I shut my eyes tightly and listened to the footsteps as they approached the side of my bed. I felt as if a pair of eyes were piercing through the covers at me. Then the footsteps moved to the foot of my bed. Minutes passed, and the presence and the air in the room was so heavy, not one sound could be heard outside, not even the crickets that often frequented my aunt's backyard. Then all the covers flew off of me and I heard a loud cackle, like one might hear from a cartoon witch. I bolted up, packed my stuff, and left that house as quickly as I could, only stopping to lock the front door as the key slipped over and over my shaking hands. I left the screen door unlocked, but figured no one could get in anyway because there was a big fence surrounding the backyard, But frankly, in that moment, it was not my top priority. I checked into the closest hotel, too scared to drive home, and spent a sleepless night there, calling my aunt in the morning. She seemed confused when I told her what had happened, as she said she had never felt any ghostly presence there, but that the nanny had mentioned it a few times. I guess she never really took it too seriously. She lived in the house for a couple of years after that and ended up relocating to Shanghai with her children for business purposes. We didn't really speak of it much, but when I told my mother, she said that she had always had a creeped out feeling there and told me that once, while she was swimming, she felt as if someone had tried to push her head underwater. After that day, I always avoided that house, coming over only when necessary and when others were inside. This is a true story that happened to me and my girlfriend. At the time, she's now my wife, 5 years ago. I just moved to Rockford after graduating college to start my first engineering job. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the top floor of a building in a small apartment complex. First couple of weeks, I spent a lot of time inside unpacking, since I didn't know anyone in town yet. It's a brand new area for me. Everything seemed fine for those first couple of weeks. About 2.5 weeks after I moved in, I woke up at 4:30 one morning to head to the gym before work. It is pitch black in my apartment as Midwest fall nights are extremely dark after the moon sets. I turn out of the T-junction that leads to the 2 bedrooms and into the main hallway. I take a few steps and then notice what appears to be eyes with bright spots in the center of each staring at me. I quickly lunged for the nearest light switch and turned it on, wondering what I saw. Being mostly a rational person, I looked for a way to explain what I had seen. I noticed some light coming through my patio door blinds from a flood lamp on the building behind mine. At the time, I chalked this up as an illusion of this light since I was new to the place and unfamiliar with it. For about 3 weeks after that, all was quiet except I had a slight uneasiness going to sleep at night. Cut to about a month later, beginning of December, and my girlfriend had recently told me she can sometimes sense spirits, but had not sensed anything in my apartment in the nights that she had stayed over. We were sitting and watching TV when she noticed some kind of spirit kneeling on the floor in the second unused bedroom. We walked in and noticed the room is colder than the surrounding hallway. We firmly tell it to go away and that it is not welcome. My girlfriend said it was gone. A few nights later, I am alone in the house sleeping. I wake up feeling a sense of dread in the middle of the night and open my eyes to see a 3-clawed hand directly above my face. Needless to say, I stayed awake the rest of the night with every light in the place on and the TV going. The rest of December is quiet, as I spent the last 2 weeks of the month at my parents' house for holidays. During the second weekend of January, my girlfriend decides to spend the weekend at my place. Things were getting serious between us at this point. Like I said, she is now my wife, and I believe this closeness we shared was making this thing mad. That night she woke me and said it felt like something had scratched her on her lower leg. Upon inspection, 3 track marks of what looked like nail or cat scratches were bright red and visible on her leg. Again, we prayed hard. I told her whatever was there to go away and slept with the lights on. About this time, we started to notice that her son, 4 years old at the time, was terrified to come over to my apartment. He wouldn't say why, just that he didn't like it and that he wanted to do something fun with me, just not at my house. My girlfriend and I shrugged it off as some weird kid thing for the time being, not quite connecting the dots. Not long after the scratching incident, maybe 5 days, I went to bed feeling uneasy and was awoke shortly after falling asleep by something kicking the underside of my bed, hard, 3 times. The air in her room was downright chilly, and I rolled over and started to pray for protection, not opening my eyes. In a moment, I heard what sounded like a wrestling match in my room. I opened my eyes but could not distinguish anything in the dark. I heard something crash into the closet door, then bump one of my nightstands in the foot of my bed hard enough to move me a bit. All of a sudden, it all went quiet, and the room felt calmer and was physically warmer. I had hoped this was the end of this ordeal, which by now has me quite afraid. About a week later, it was my girlfriend's weekend without her boy. His dad had him, and she wanted to stay over again. She lived in her mom's house and preferred my place. Everything is great during the day and evening. We fall asleep, and I wake up to the sense of motion in the bed. I look over and see my girlfriend's leg outstretched and in the air as if something is pulling on it. Then her body was being pulled by her leg, very similar to that scene in the movie Paranormal Activity, where the girl was being dragged out of the bed in the same manner. I reacted quickly and jumped on top of her to hold her back into the bed. I could feel her body being pulled against mine as she woke up screaming, saying something has her leg. I was a strong guy at the time, deadlifting over 500 pounds, and I had to use every ounce of my strength to hold her back on the bed and fight against the pull of this thing. We waited out the rest of the night in each other's arms, awake, with all the lights on again. After that, she swore not to spend the night there anymore, and we were both more terrified than ever before or since. This thing grew bolder with her out of the picture and started harassing me all over the apartment. I would come home and find stuff out of place or cabinets open that was closed when I left. It made its presence known the entire time I was in the apartment from then on. I put up crosses and left open Bibles outturned to passages of protection from evil. These seemed to offer me a small zone of protection, but I was seeing the need to move out soon. I've never felt a fear like this before or since. After speaking with my pastor and mentor, they both advised me to leave as quickly as I could and not put anything out in the apartment that would give a clue as to where I was moving. My girlfriend let me stay with her while I secured a new apartment. The last time either of us set foot in that apartment at night, we had to retrieve something I needed for work from, of course, the master bedroom. My girlfriend grabbed it out of the room and started backing out slowly, turning out the lights as she went. When she reached the light switch at the door, she backed out and slid her hand to the door to flick off the light. As soon as she did this, she heard the thing running towards the door, and just as she got it locked, it vibrated violently as something slammed against it. I moved my stuff out a couple weeks later in the daylight and still get a creepy feeling of remembering when I drive past when in town visiting my in-laws. Whatever it was did not follow, and I have not had any issues since. This started last week. Me, my wife, and I have 3 kids, so our house is pretty noisy even at night. Our room is in the basement, so we hear a lot. We've always figured that it was the kids tossing and turning, even sleepwalking. So last week, our kids went to the grandparents, and that's where the fun started. We've slowly come to realize that the knocking, tapping, and footsteps are not our kids at night. It being a 40-year-old house, I attributed it to settling and creaking, or so I told myself for comfort. So as the week progressed and the noises became the norm, that is until 3 nights ago. 3 days ago, I was downstairs and watching TV. I heard the noises a lot from upstairs, and I didn't pay attention to it, because I was watching a movie. I just pushed them into the back of my mind and thought nothing of it. That is, until the batteries in my remote died. So I went upstairs to grab some. I heard the knocking and clicking sounds intensify as I walked up the stairs. I slowed a little and they continued. So I reached the top of the stairs and turned into the kitchen, also facing the front room. The clicking noises stopped, and I see the closet door, the one right next to my front door, close. It was open by about a foot. I hadn't closed it earlier. As I watched it close, my only thought was that I'd caught a burglar in my home. I didn't move. I just yelled for my wife. I stared at the door and made a gun with my finger to signal my wife to bring it. She did, and I cleared the house. No one and no sign of anything being there. Again, I had a suspicion that this was paranormal, because that door doesn't move on its own. Trust me, I tried everything to get it to move. It's a stiff, hinged door, and I can't get it to open or close without applying force. It won't even continue its movement once I stop applying force to it. Nothing really happened the next night, but last night, however, things escalated. I'm at a loss for what happened. The noises started in the room above me and worked its way through the hall toward the stairs. It was a tapping noise. It sounded like every few feet. As it made it to the stairs, I heard only one tap as it was coming downstairs. Then it started downstairs and made its way into my room. Then a tap on my door. Then on the wall above my head. At this point, I know it's not any physical person, and I'm completely freaked out. Goosebumps and freezing. That wasn't the worst part. My wife woke up and proceeded to tell me about her dream. She had dreamt that a girl was upstairs, came down and into our room. It was an 18 or 19-year-old girl. She screamed at my wife and burst into an intensely bright white light. She then woke up. Talking about it today, I'm less freaked out, so I've asked questions. She said that she felt that the name was Julie, and that she was upset we hadn't noticed her. That she just wanted to be acknowledged. We lived in a very small town, and records aren't readily available for us to look up, or if there's any history of anything happening. We do know the previous owner rarely stayed there. She had stayed at her boyfriend's house more than she was home. Our neighbors told us this. There has been several owners, and none have seemed to stay for extended periods. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. Don't forget to share it with your friends. And if you have suggestions for future videos, please send them over to docket360@gmail.com. You'll find a link in the description below. And as always, have a good night.